routing using React Router. So firstly, in previous session, we have made an API call, we got the blocks data, and then we have displayed it to the user, right? So here, to make the API call, we use the fetch method, right? So, and also we have displayed a loader during the API call, right? Using a third-party package, React Loader Spinner. Now, coming to today's session, in today's session, we'll see how to navigate to a specific block using the path parameters. And then we'll also cover about match object, which is related to the path params. Okay, so let's get started. So firstly, you need to run this command to set the code breakdown for today's session, and then run npm install, then all the dependencies will get installed. Okay, so now if you run npm start, you'll be able to see an output in this manner where we'll have the list of blocks displayed in the home, right? So we already have built this in the previous session, so we are going to start from here. Okay, so in today's session, we want to navigate to a specific block. That is, so in the home, we have a list of block items, right? So by clicking on a block item, we want to navigate to a specific block and view the entire block. Okay, so that is, we want to read the block, the content related to that block. Okay, so that is what we want to do. So for that, so there you can see, right? So there is a path that we want to define, that is /blocks/:id. Okay, so let's say you want to navigate to a block whose ID is 1. So the corresponding path would be /blocks/1. Now, if you want to navigate to a block with an ID 2, so then the corresponding path would be /blocks/2. Okay, so there you can see, right? /blocks/1. So there you can see we have the block with ID 1. So similarly, if you try to access a /blocks/2, then we'll be navigating to the block with the ID 2, right? Clear? So this is what we want to achieve, right? So let's understand the steps involved here. So firstly, we want to add a link to the block item, right? So we have the list of block items in the home. So by clicking on the block item, we have to navigate to a specific block. So we have to add the link. And then we have to add the block item details route, right? So we have to map the path and the component that needs to be rendered. So that is the route. So after that, so to fetch the block specific details, we have to make an API call and finally display it to the user. So these are the steps involved here. Okay, so let's do each of these in a step-by-step manner. So firstly, let's add link for the block item. Okay, so for that, in the block item component, so firstly we are importing the link, and then for that particular component we are adding the link, right? There you can see we have the class name equal to block item link. Okay, so here we also have to specify the path. So there you can see we are specifying the path, that is 2, and then so as we understood, the path is /blocks/ then the ID of the block, right? So now how do we get the ID? It is already present in the block data. Okay, so from the block data we can get the ID. So there you can see, so using that ID we are defining the path there. Okay, so 2 equal to, and then we have specified the path. Okay, so if we click on the block with ID 1, so then the corresponding path would be /blocks/1. So if you click on a block with ID 2, then the corresponding path would be /blocks/2 in this manner. Okay, clear? So now let's try this out. So here you can see in the code playground. So as we previously understood, right? So if you look at the app.js, so here we have some routes, right? So then in the home we are displaying the blocks list, right? So in the components, so if you go to the blocks list, so here you can see that in the blocks list, right, we are rendering the block items, right? So we have the block items here. Okay, so now if we go to the block item, so this is displaying the entire block item, right? Okay, so now for this we want to add a link, right? For the block item we have to add a link, right? So let's see how to do that. So firstly, we already know how that we have to import the link from the React Router now. So we are importing the link now. So next we'll add the link. So for this entire component, so the link should be present. So let's enclose this entire JSX within the link. Okay, so let's add a link here. So wherever we click on the block item, so that should navigate to that path, right? So we have to provide that link wherever, maybe in the block item, wherever we click, it should navigate to it. So that's the reason we are covering the entire thing using the link component. Okay, so now for this we have some styling. So the class name is blog-item-link, and also here we have to specify the path using the 2. Okay, so coming to the path here, so as we understood, the path that we want to navigate it to is /blocks/ and then the corresponding ID. Okay, so /blocks/ and we have to specify the ID here. Okay, so now how do we specify the ID? Okay, do we have the ID access? Yes, in the block data, we have the ID, right? You can see here we have the ID. So we can directly specify that ID here. Okay. So now let me make this into a template string. So here we'll include that ID. Okay, clear? So now you can see that we added a link. So to this, we have specified the path, which is /blocks/ and then the corresponding ID. Okay, so now let's have a look at the output. So firstly, we have to start the server. So npm start. So now let's navigate to it. So localhost :3000 will give us our blog, right? So now you can see we have a list of blog items. So each of this is a blog item component, right? So for this entire component, we have added a link so that wherever we click, so we will navigate to the specific blog. Okay, so now I'm clicking this. So there you can see on the top, the path has changed to /blocks/1, right? So right now it's 404 because we haven't mentioned the route. So that's the reason it's displaying the not found component, right? So let's say now I'll click on this, right? So now you can observe the path here, /blocks/3, right? So the path is appropriately being updated, right? Okay. So we have seen the path being updated, right? So we have appropriately specified the path and you can see this output, right? So we have seen this. Okay, so by clicking on it, so appropriately the path was updated. Okay, so now we are done with the first step, that is adding the link for the blog item. So the next thing is we have to add the blog item details route. Okay, so we have to specify that route where we are going to map the path with the corresponding component that needs to be rendered. Okay, so regarding the component that needs to be rendered, so for /blocks/1, for /blocks/2/3, for all of these, that component that needs to be rendered is blog item details. Okay, so for all of these, the data that we need to render is varying, but the component that needs to be rendered is one and the same. Okay, so for this, what you could do is you can write it in this manner. So path equal to /blocks/1 and the corresponding component is blog item details. Again route, so /blocks/2, so blog item details, /3 blog item details. But there is actually an easy way, right? So if we have 100 blogs, so you keep on writing this, right? So what you could do is you can make use of the path parameter. So instead of writing /1/2/3, you can directly write /:param. So here in our case, it is ID. So you can specify /:ID. So in this way, we can actually make use of the path parameter to specify this. Okay. So whatever may be the URL like /blocks/1 or /2 or /3. So all these will be mapped to the path /blocks/:ID. Okay. These all will be matched to the path /blocks/:ID. Okay. So then obviously for this path, we will map the blog item details as a component, so that will get rendered. So for all of these URLs, so what would the item that would be rendered? The component, it is blog item details. So that component will be rendered. Okay, clear? So now let's add that route. So in the app.js file, so that's where we specify all these routes, right? So there we are going to import the blog item details component. So that is what we have to render. And there you can see in the route, we have mentioned the path equal to /blocks/:ID. Here we are making use of the path parameter. So then the corresponding component is blog item details. Okay, so we have specified the blog item details there. Okay, clear? So with this, so we'll be able to see an output in this manner. So whenever we click a particular blog item, so we'll be able to see an output in this way. Okay, now let's give this a try. So here, let's add the route in the app.js file. So route, so the path is, so that is /blocks/ and here we are going to make use of the path parameter. So :ID. Okay, so then the component that needs to be rendered is, so we have to import that component first. So let me do that. So import blog item details from /components/ blog item details. So here you can see, right? So we are importing this component. So this has to be rendered here. So there you can see I'm specifying it. So for the path /blocks/:ID, the corresponding component is blog item details. So I've specified that. So I'm going to save this. So and now let's have a look at the output. Okay, so this is a particular blog item, right? So by clicking on this, so here you can see the path has been updated as /blocks/1 and the corresponding component also is being displayed, which is blog item details. And here you can see, right? Currently it's being rendered using dummy data. So that's the reason it's looking in this manner. Okay, so we have appropriately added the link and we have appropriately added the route also. Okay, so here since we are making use of dummy data, so for all the blocks, so we'll be able to see the same output. Okay, so there you can see. Okay, So here we have seen this output. Since we are making use of the dummy data, so that's a reason for /blog/1, we have the same output. Again for /blog/2, we have the same output. Okay. So in the blog item details component, so there is blog data on the top. So we are making use of that dummy data and we are displaying the component. So you were able to see that output. But now we want to replace this dummy data with the data that we get by making an API call, right? So let's do that. So we want to make an API call to get the blog specific details and we want to display it to the user. Okay, so let's do that. So let's get the blog specific data by making an API call, right? Okay. So there in the blog item details, so which is a component, right? So within that, it's a class component. So within that, so we have component id mount. So generally we make API calls in the component id mount. So that's where we are going to make the API call. Okay, so this dot get blog item data. Okay, so that is an arrow function. So here we are going to make the API call. So the API that we are going to call is get blog specific details API. So you can have a look at the URL there. So apis.ccpp.in/blogs/:id. So here ID is the path parameter. So if we pass the ID appropriately, so then the corresponding blog specific details, we will get it as the response. Okay, clear? So in the API, in the path, we have to pass the ID as a path parameter. Then the specific blog details, we will get it as a response. Okay, clear? So now the question is, how do we access the ID in the blog item details? So right now, we are making the API call in the blog item details component, right? So there we have to make the API call. And in the URL, we have to specify the ID of the blog, right? So how do we access the ID? That's the question, right? So we have to specify the ID in the URL, but how do we access it? So for that, we can actually make use of the match object, okay? So whenever a component is rendered by the route, so using the route, if we render a component, some additional props will be passed to the component. Okay, so few of them are match, location, history. Okay, so in our case, we are going to make use of match. Okay, so you can directly print this dot props and you will be able to see few additional props that are being passed by the route. Okay, history, location, match. Let's give this a try. So here we are actually displaying blog item details, right? So now let's have a look at the blog item details component. Okay, so here you can see we have blog item details. We are going to that. So here in the blog item details, right? So we are displaying the blog item. Okay, and then here you can see that we are making use of some dummy data and we are displaying. Right now we want to make an API call and display it accordingly, right? So as we understood, so we are going to make an API call in the component id mount. So component id mount is a method. So within this we are going to make the API call. Say this get blog item data. So blog item data would be an arrow function, right? So here we are going to make the API call. So as we understood, the API involves a path parameter where we have to specify the ID, right? Right now in the blog data or in any data that we have, so we don't have the ID. So how do we get the ID? So for that, as we understood that when we are rendering a component using the route, right, this blog item details is being rendered by the route, right? So this route is actually rendering this blog item details. So this route will actually pass some additional props to this component, okay? So we can have a look at it by displaying that. So console.log of this dot props. So we'll have a look at it. So firstly, I'm going to inspect console. So now I'll click on a particular item. So here you can expand and see. So these are the additional props being passed by the route, history, location, and match. So if you observe match, so this is where we have the ID. Okay, so we'll understand about this. Okay, so basically the route will pass some additional props, so using which we can actually access the path. Okay, so we understood this, right? Okay, so coming to the match. So the match object will contain the information about the path from which the component is rendered, right? So the route will render the component. So corresponding to a path, that path information will be present in the match object, okay? So using this, we can understand about the path, okay? Clear? So now, we'll access that match object and we'll display. So if you display the match object, so there you can see under the params, we have ID:1, right? So actually our path was /blogs/1/2/ the ID, right? So we can access that using this match object. So under params, so we'll have the ID as 1, okay? Or ID as 2 appropriately, right? So the ID corresponding to that block will be present in the params of the match object. Okay, so in this way we can access the params from the match object, and from the params we can access the ID and we can finally display it. Okay, let's try this out. So as we understood, so in props, we'll have some additional information, right? So here in our case, so we actually want to access the ID, right, which is present in the path, right? So that is present in the match object, okay? So what you could do is, so you can access the match object, so using this dot props. So and then let's display the match and we'll look at the output. So there you can see, right? So in the match object, so you can see we have the params, so where ID colon 1, okay? So using this, we can access the block ID, okay? So if you observe that in the app.js, so we have mentioned the path parameter as colon ID. So that is a reason in the match object, so under the params, we have ID colon 1. Okay, so that is a relation here, right? So the path parameter that you have specified here will be appropriately passed by route to the block item details as props under the match object. Okay, so now let's access it. So in the match object, so we have params. So from that, we want to access it, right? So here you can see in the match object, we have params. Within that, we have the ID, right? So firstly, we got the params and then let's access the ID. Okay, so now let's just display the ID. Okay. So now let's just click on this and you can see the ID is 1. So now again, let's click on this and you can see the ID is 2, right? So now again, we'll clear this. Let's click on this. So the ID is 3 in this manner. Okay, clear? So you can even try it out. So here you can say /4 and then you can see we got the ID as 4, right? So appropriately, we can access the ID in this manner. So the issue of accessing the ID in the block item details is resolved. So now we have the ID. So then we can appropriately create the URL to make the API call, right? So there you can see, right? So API is .ccbp.in/block/ and you have to specify the ID, say /1. So then you will get a response in this manner. You can try this out in the browser, okay? So you'll get a response in this manner, okay? So now let's make this API call. So using fetch, so we'll specify the API URL. So then with this, we'll get the response. So then we are going to convert that into a JSON and get the data. And if you print the data, you'll be able to see this out, okay? So let's do these steps. So we know how to access the ID now. So we have the ID ready. So now we have to specify the API URL, right? So fetch of coming to the URL. So it is https://apis.ccbp.in/blogs/ and now comes the ID, okay? So $ID. So I'm embedding that here, okay? So this is the URL. So now we'll make an API call here. So await, this will give us the response. So since we are using await, this should be an asynchronous function. So async. So now we get the response. So the next thing is we have to convert that into a JSON. So equal to await response.json. Okay. So then let's display this data. So let's have a look at the data that we get. Okay. So there you can see. So for this particular one, you can see the output here, right? So the ID is 4 and then you can see the author, the avatar URL, content, this image URL, title, topic, all this information is present here. Okay. So here you can access some other one, say /1 and you can see the data here. Okay. So there you can see. Cool. So we are done with these steps. The next thing is, as we understood, right? In the backend, we use snake case, whereas in the front end, we use the camel case. So right now we have the snake case, so we have to update it with the camel case. So we are doing those steps there. There you can see updated data with the title equal to data.title, image URL has been updated, and all these are appropriately converted we are converting the snake case to the camel case. Okay, so let's do this step. So as we understood, so in the front end part, we'll use a camel case. So that's the reason we have to update. So updated data would be. So there are different things involved here. So appropriately we'll update them, starting with the title. So data.title. Okay. So next the image URL. So snake case. So it would be in this manner. So data.image_URL. So on the backend side, it's a snake case. So that's the reason it's image_URL. So avatar URL. Okay. Similarly, we have some more things like content. Okay. And then there is topic. So all these things are present. So appropriately we have specified, right? There's author also. So we'll specify that too. So there are a few details related to the specific block, and appropriately we have converted them into the snake case and we are storing that in the updated data. Okay. So this step is done. So now we have the data that we got from the API, right? So based on this, we have to update the UI, right? So first we have to update the state based on this. So in the state, we are maintaining the block data. So initially it would be an empty object, right? So later on, once the API call is done and once we have the updated data, we'll update the state. So this dot set state of block data colon updated data. Okay. So then appropriately the block data will be updated. Okay. Now based on this state, so we have to render the UI, right? So coming to the render function there, okay, so from the state we are accessing the block data and appropriately we are displaying the content based on it, okay. So now we can get rid of that dummy data, okay. So with this, you'll be able to see an output in this manner, okay. So if you click on a particular block item, so if you navigate there, you can see we are able to see the block specific details, right? Similarly, there you can see, right? Okay, now let's try this out. So we are done with the getting data. So the next thing is, so the data that we got, based on this, we have to render the UI. So for that, we have to maintain that in the state. So state equal to, so in this we have the block data. So initially it would be an empty object. So later on, once the API call is done, we'll update the state, this dot set state of, and then, so the updated object would be block data colon updated data, okay. So with this, I have set the state. Okay. Based on the state, we have to render, right? So coming to the render function here. So here we are calling this render block item details method. So let's go to that method. Right now, we are making use of the dummy data. So instead, we have to access the data from the state and appropriately display. So for that, so block data equal to this dot state. Okay. And now let's get rid of the dummy data. Okay. So we are done with this, appropriately it's compiled. So now let's have a look at the output. Okay. So let's go to home, let's click on a particular blog item and you can see the corresponding specific details. Okay. So now in this way we are able to navigate to a specific blog, right? There you can see. Okay. There you can see, right? Cool. Right. So in this way, we are done with navigating to a specific block, right? So firstly, we added the link. So appropriately by clicking on a particular blog item, so the path here was updated. So then the path and the corresponding component that needs to be rendered has been mapped using the route. So here we have made use of the path params, right? So instead of writing for /1, /2, /3, directly we made use of the path parameter. So /:id. So with this, we were able to achieve it, right? So then appropriately we have made the API call and we were able to display this, right? Okay. So we are done with this and we got this output, right? Okay. So here what you could do is you can try adding a loader while fetching the specific blog details, right? When we are clicking a blog item, so we are making an API call, right? So when the API call is in progress, try adding a loader. Okay. So you have to try this out. Cool. So I'll summarize today's session. So in today's session, we have seen about navigating to a specific block using the path parameters, right? And then we also understood about the match object, which is an additional